Recently, here in the United States, there's been a lot of examples of certain organizations being targeted by the federal government and labeled as potential terrorist groups. And this is a big deal because it's going to affect you directly in the future. There's a purpose and an intent behind this to leverage it against you when that time comes. And I do mean you because it affects just about everyone in this community. And we have all types of examples. We have pro-life groups being labeled as potential terrorist threats, according to a leaked Army training slide, where the Army was actually designating pro-life people as the potential threat during a certain training session. We also have Catholic churches being surveilled by the FBI and infiltrated by the FBI because they're concerned about domestic terrorism spawning from those places of worship. We also have Trump supporters and veterans being labeled as potential violent terror threats according to the DHS, or the Department of Homeland Security. Now, it's not just on the right either. This is also affecting the left just as equally, which should show that the federal government doesn't care which way you vote. They care about being able to control you in the future and being able to be as authoritarian as possible. And on the left, we have pro-choice groups being designated as potential terror groups, and we also have the Free Palestine movement being associated with other terrorist organizations. Now, interestingly enough, the Palestine movement is working with a group called Palestine Legal, and Palestine Legal warned about escalating efforts to weaponize terror laws to suppress advocacy groups. Now, that might make sense to you based on their affiliations, but this applies to all groups that I just mentioned, not just the Free Palestine movement. And that's what got me thinking about what would this actually look like and what's the point of all this? Why are they making you a terrorist? There has to be more to it, and I do believe there is. Now, before I start telling you about why, I got to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and of course, thanks to them, I can put out content like this for you for free so that you have this information in the future. And of course, Midway USA can help you get better prepared for whatever may come thereafter. So big thanks to them. Now, what happens once a group is designated a terrorist organization? Well, law enforcement gains a lot of additional powers. And I want you to imagine this because it's not just about what they can do, it's about who they're targeting. If you have Catholic churches being considered potential spawning places of domestic terrorism, if you have pro-choice groups being considered for potential terrorist organizations, even if you have the Free Palestine movement being considered a potential terrorist organization, this allows law enforcement to use these leverages against you. So if your church or your organization, for example, maybe you're a Boy Scout troop, for all we know, they're going to use this against any organization that poses a potential threat. So you can't just look at it from the dichotomy of left versus right. You have to look at it as this could happen to me, especially if you're involved with any level of organization. Once that group is designated a terrorist organization or even a potential one, law enforcement gets access to enhanced surveillance, financial disruption capabilities, right? They can go into bank accounts and freeze assets and all kinds of things. They can implement travel restrictions to say you can't leave the country or possibly even leave your state for all we know. They also get additional search and seizure powers, which means they can go into your home, go into your business, go into your church, start taking things in order to do an investigation. And they also would have the ability to take preventative measures. What does that mean? It's basically pre-crime. If they think that there's a threat there that they're concerned about, they might just arrest you in order to verify that it can't happen, which at that point, we no longer have any level of real due process. Now, of course, they will say that due process still exists when it comes to domestic terror threats as opposed to foreign terror threats, but I don't think that's exactly how this works, do you? So those are the additional powers that law enforcement would suddenly have access to if they decided that your Lutheran church was a potential terrorist organization. And next thing you know, just because you go there on Sunday once a week, you're suddenly affiliated with this group. Now, what crimes would you be charged with if your church was considered to be one of these things, right? Because that's what you should be thinking about right now. This is how they're going to weaponize these terror laws against us. And of course, ever since 9/11, we know that all of these additional laws, like the Patriot Act, that have been put into place have been abused and stuck around because of how powerful they really are. So what would you be charged with, right? Well, first off, you can be charged for harboring terrorists. So what does that mean? It means you provide safety and shelter or any level of assistance to a terror organization. So if you go to church and you put an offering in once a week, right, in order to support the church, well, if the church gets declared a terrorist organization, now you're harboring terrorists because you're providing assistance. Not to mention the fact that the building itself is a place of shelter and security, and anyone who's going in there is providing that for each other. So understand that that organization can easily be charged with that, as well as anybody who's involved. Not to mention, then we move on to material support. Material support is basically saying that you provide money, equipment, training, or even things like childcare could be considered material support. Does your church offer any of that? Does your church offer any level of first aid training? Does your church offer any level of childcare, maybe even called Sunday school? These are all things that could easily be considered material support for a terrorist organization if your particular religion is considered to be one, right? And this applies to organizations as well. You know, if you're part of the Boy Scouts and they decide that your troop number, whatever it may be, is a potential issue, then that first aid class you guys took, that is you providing training to possible terrorists. You see how easily this can be used against us. This is why it's important to look at it from this non-biased point of view. It doesn't need to be left or right or anything like that. Like, this is literally going to happen to everybody if they decide they need to do it, right? Now, another thing that can get you arrested because of being around some of these organizations is just plain old affiliation, right? Guilty by association is a real thing when it comes to terror organizations. And as long as you know what the group is doing or what they stand for, or if you know the group is considered to be a terror organization, you're an affiliate now. And as an affiliate, you can just be arrested. So all these things can happen at the blink of an eye. As long as the government decides whatever organization you're involved in is either a potential or a terror organization. And at that point in time, there's a lot of crimes you can be charged with just for existing in that sphere. Not to mention all of the additional powers that law enforcement suddenly wields against you and anyone else involved. That's why they're making you a terrorist. It's not because they're trying to protect us. It's because they're trying to gain additional powers to use against us in the future. And of course, if any of the things I just went over would apply to your church, or maybe veterans organizations, or your political party or political action committee, or whatever it is, then this could be your future, right? If you go and volunteer at the VA, I mean, at some point, they might consider our veterans to be a potential terrorist organization. That's how crazy this is getting, right? And all the examples are already there. And I just kept asking the question, why are they doing this? Why are they trying to make everybody a terrorist? Not just left or right, on both sides, right? You would think if it was only on one side, it would be a little bit easier to understand. But it's on both sides. And then you really have to start thinking, what's the purpose of this? Because on face value, it would seem to be in order to secure the country and protect its people. But if we really wanted to do that, there's a lot of other things that are of much higher priority right now than labeling pro-choice groups as a terrorist organization, right? And so once I started to think about, well, what would this give them access to, and what would they be able to do with that if they were able to prove that these organizations were actual terror groups? Well, now you know why they're doing it. So I wanted to give you this information because I found it to be important, especially as things move forward and we have this tumultuous election cycle going on. Who knows what groups they're going to consider to be, let's just say, non-essential, that maybe need to go away, and how easy it will be for them in order to accomplish that goal once they're considered terrorists. So let me know in the comments below what you think about this, but I just wanted to get this out there and give you something to think about. If you're a part of any organization, this could happen to you. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. It doesn't matter which way you vote. It doesn't matter what type of religion or what type of group you're organized with. Any level of organization is going to be scrutinized. Why? I don't know. In my opinion, maybe it's because our founding fathers organized and things happened then after. Anything else you need from me at all, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.